Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you, birthday girl. I was on holiday visiting my family, and it was my niece's birthday. She was turning 21. I remember when she was such a sweet girl. Unfortunately, with enough time, that sweet girl has turned into something not so sweet. She was spoiled and pretty much a bitch. After talking to her for a little bit, I decided she didn't really value the life given to her. By this point, maybe it was time for her to learn what a real life is and what she really needed to appreciate in life. No appreciation for what had been given to her, nothing. Just a spoiled brat. I proceeded to talk to her and told her to come out to the garden, a good distance from the house. And I had a very, very special surprise for her. Now, I'm sure she was thinking it was a horse or something, had promptly agreed. I told her to let no one know that she was going to meet me out there, as it may spoil the big surprise. She asked, "What is it? What is it?" And I said, "Don't worry about it, but we will have to explain this to your mother. But I believe with all the property that you own out here, it won't be a problem." She promptly agreed. So we agreed to meet up in 1 hour's time in the garden. I went into my car and grabbed out a hunting knife. I had it hidden in my seat just in case, certain measures took place. And I hid it inside the seam of my pants and went walking down to the garden. When I seen her coming from the distance, I hid behind a tree. Her looking around, finally reaching the garden, she started calling for me, and I said, "I'm over here," in a low enough tone voice not to be heard. She came over and looked at me and asked, kind of in an impatient voice, almost a very spoiled tone, "So, where is my surprise?" I smiled and head-butted her. She fell to the ground. Nose bloodied, she was trying to figure out what had happened. But before she could, I jumped on top of her and started choking her until she went unconscious. I looked around for something to bind her with, and there was a bunch of vines on a tree. They were thin, but they were tough. I then shoved a bunch of leaves in her mouth and wrapped the vines around her face to hold the leaves in place. Just in case if she started screaming, I had something there to at least muffle her screams with. Now, by this time, she had awoken. I already had her naked, bound, and hidden in the bushes. All I could really do was stand there and look over her. And she at first seemed confused, very confused. I don't think she could really grasp what was going on, let alone what was going to happen. So I told her, "You're about to be defiled by a god, much like Mary. But unlike Mary, you will never bear my Savior to the world, as you are an abomination." I know what many of you are wondering. Yes, I had my way with her. She was defiled in every way, so she would see that she was nothing but a thing put here on this earth to be used and discarded like the trash she was. She was just crying and trying to scream, but the muffled voice, it didn't project very far. Standing over her naked now, I thought, what could I do to her next? I walked over to where my clothes were and took the knife and put it between her legs. She got quiet very quickly. She started trembling and even urinating on herself. I then said, "For too long, you have lost what the value of life is, to live every day as if it were your last. You have not done this. You have taken for granted way too much. And although I assure you know now, it is too late. If I were to let you go, you would just tell what I have done, and you would play the victim. This I cannot have, as I still have work to do." She shook her head no, 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 more frantically, more than ever. Sheer terror is all you could see in her eyes. Yes, she now understood. I was going to do this. I could tell she was trying to vomit, but the leaves in her mouth were hindering her. She looked as if, well, she was having a harder and harder time breathing. So I told her, "No, princess, not yet. You still haven't gotten your present." I then proceeded to lunge the knife inside of her over and over again. I did so 21 times. 21 times to represent each year she has lived on this earth and wasted it. She was still surprisingly alive. Her legs were kicking and moving around. She was trying to scream. Blood was going everywhere. I then cut into her stomach. I put the knife down, put my hands where the cut was, and ripped her stomach open. It took a little work, but I got it. I grabbed another vine, wrapping it around her neck. I strangled her with it. I know any of the other would have probably eventually killed her. But I didn't need anyone finding her in time, and for some reason she was able to tell them it was me. I wasn't quite sure just how dead she was yet. So I walked around her, thinking what to do next. I turned her over, placed my foot on the back of her neck, stomped it 7 or 8 times to make sure her neck was broken. Now I was sure she was dead. Afterwards, I walked over to the gardener's wash station and showered off and waited till I was dry. I put my clothes on and walked back up to the house. Everybody was so preoccupied with the birthday party, I was easily able to sneak in upstairs and pretend like I had been sleeping when someone finally knocked on my door of the bedroom and told me that they were just about to cut the cake as soon as my niece returned. An hour had passed, and out of nowhere I heard a scream. Thinking she was still alive, I ran out of the house, but it was the gardener's wife. She was running up saying something horrible had happened to my niece. She was babbling, but when I asked what, she couldn't really say anything. She just started vomiting and passed out. At this point, everyone was coming out of the house. Finally, the gardener's wife awoke. She told everyone where my niece was, and they all ran down to see. I ran down there with a very concerned look on my face, much like everyone else. When everyone got to where my niece was, there were so many different reactions. Damn it. I honestly didn't know which one to do. So I just sat on the ground and put my hands on my face like a couple of them did. Closest to her was my sister, and that's exactly what she was doing. So I figured if my sister did it, I could do it. A little while later, the police arrived. They were there for what seemed to be hours. When they asked what was my relation, I told them that that was my sister and I was the uncle. They then asked if I was the blood uncle or some other relation, and I told them my sister was adopted. So it had pretty much been like my sister, and that was pretty much like my niece, and she was my niece by all accounts. I just kept speaking with a lot of anger in my voice because that's how everybody else was doing. After about an hour, they walked down by where the gardener's wash station was. They had put something into a bag. I thought to myself, fuck, what did I forget? Well, I was worrying for nothing. I guess in my rush to wash up, I didn't notice the gardener's clippers were on the ground by the wash station and had my niece's blood splashed all over them. I guess it had splashed whenever I was washing off. They asked the gardener where he had been during the day. He said he had been taking a walk and had only just returned. His wife had been up at the house all day and he had no alibi. His wife instantly started yelling at him, "I have seen you looking at her so often, how could you?" He, of course, saying he really didn't do it, and he only went out for a walk did him no good. They then said they needed to question him more, but had to remove him from the situation. Because suddenly everyone there, myself included, had to be held back by the cops from attacking him. Thank goodness. Had it not been for that, the way the cops were looking at me, it may have been me going down to the station. I should have thought this one through a little better. But time was kind of the essence, so I couldn't. I have to say, had it not been for his wife, this may or may not have had a different outcome. I am glad she was there, though. It's amazing how jealousy can turn an innocent man into a guilty one. Then again, was he so innocent? He was, after all, lusting after my niece, to the point his own wife believed him capable of rape and murder. So once again, a God walks free on this earth to do his bidding. So do you really want to know more? Are you really sure? My journey is almost over. There is a number in my head. Thus, this is the number I must complete. I must complete this number to be elevated unto a whole new level. The level of a god, a predator versus the prey. The god amongst men. These are my confessions. Mine and mine alone. They are not yours. They are for me to leave a living legacy throughout this earth.